If the season started today, Joe Flacco would be my QB1. What does the rest of the quarterback depth chart look like, in my opinion, after Browns minicamp? I'll reveal it next in the Locked On Browns podcast.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Dog Pound? I'm Spencer German, your host of the Locked On Browns podcast. I'm proudly covering your Cleveland Browns each and every single day in the land and on the road. My post-minicamp, pre-training camp, whichever you prefer, quarterback depth chart is going to be unveiled here momentarily. Also, my non-quarterback takeaways from minicamp this week, and Duce Staley gives some reason for excitement when it comes to the Browns' upcoming season, and more so, I think, the offense in particular for this team. I do want to thank you for being on every day at the Locked On Browns podcast, making us your first listen every single day. Remember, you can find Cleveland Browns content with Locked On Browns every week, Monday through Friday, guaranteed, with bonus content on some weekends as well. And remember, it's totally free to you. Just hit that subscribe button wherever it is that you get your podcasts, and of course, at the Locked On Browns YouTube channel, where you can also get involved in the show by sharing your thoughts on anything we discussed today in that comment section. This is your team, so I encourage you, and I like when you're a part of the conversation every single episode and every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. And yes, mandatory minicamp is in the books, and given everything we watched transpire with the quarterback competition, it only seems fitting that I unveil my own personal, and this is my personal opinions, my personal thoughts, quarterback depth chart as things stand right now from my perspective. People might have different ones. People might disagree. I'm sure there's going to be a flood of comments from people who are like, Shedeur should be number one, and that's that, and you're an idiot because you're not putting him number one. If I'm not putting him number one, whatever it's going to, well, I'm not putting him number one. I told you guys, Flacco's my number one guy, and I'll walk you through sort of person by person here why I feel the way that I do about that person being where they are on this depth chart. And you can, fight back on it. You can agree with it, whatever. But as things stand right now, with minicamp in the books, based on everything we watched transpire, yes, Joe Flacco will be my QB1 if the season was starting tomorrow, or maybe a better way to phrase it is like going into training camp at the end of next month. I would have Flacco be the number one guy. And part of that is just, as I've talked about already, this idea that if the Browns have a young team, the Browns have a really, really young team right now. We know this. It's no secret. Two young running backs that are trying to sort of establish themselves, a receiving core that's very going to make this team, or if he's going to sort of stay on the straight and narrow here. A young tight end that they're hoping can be a solid pass catcher for them. And without much wide receiver talent, they might depend on him a little bit more, because he might need to be that slot guy primarily for them. And your offensive line's a veteran group, but in general, like, you need a quarterback that is going to help sort of lift those guys up and get the best out of those guys, start building confidence for them, and that's Flacco to me. Out of the gate and early in the schedule, week 1 through 6, it's a gauntlet. It's a tough stretch that you have to play. Really, weeks 1 through 7, I think, is a tough stretch, and so you need somebody who can navigate that, who can lift guys up. We've seen Flacco single-handedly essentially turn David Njoku into a Pro Bowler. That 5 games with Joe Flacco under center at the end of that 2023 season is what put David Njoku into the Pro Bowl and got him enough votes and got him the votes necessary to be in that spot. He made Elijah Moore that year look like a really solid NFL wide receiver as like in a secondary role. He put up some big numbers with Flacco. Like, this is, it's been kind of a common theme that Flacco has been able to lift guys up and make them look better. And so with a young team like this, I just think it makes sense to start Flacco week 1 or not even at least as things stand right now. And I think it makes sense that like he would be the front runner for this job, especially how things transpired during minicamp. Like, he didn't take a lot of reps the first 2 days. Day 3 was reserved for him. He took a ton of reps on day 3 with the ones and during 11 on 11s. And, I think that was by design. They didn't necessarily need to see certain things from Joe Flacco. This time of year was not for him. He knows this offense. He knows what he's doing. He knows how to make all the throws. He's got 17 years of experience to fall back on, plus his 2023 campaign where he learned the nuances of what Kevin Stefanski's system calls for. So he's the most comfortable. He's the most prepared. He's the most at this point in his career proven. So I feel like at this juncture going into training camp, he should be quarterback one for all those reasons as I listed above. And that's who I would have at the top of the depth chart when training camp opens up. If it was me, again, this is just if it was me. My number 2 quarterback, I'm going to do it. I'm saying Shedeur Sanders. I know people are going to be mad he's not one. I know people are going to be mad that I have him above some of the others. I can't win with this conversation regardless of what I say. But I think Shedeur showed me enough during minicamp in terms of like the progress he's made from when he first came in. There were some things with his mechanics that he has cleaned up. He's a lot tighter in the way that he drops back and delivers the football. And he made the most like head turning throws during minicamp of any of the 4 quarterbacks. Like he was throwing deep passes. He was throwing quick passes. He was throwing passes over the middle. I had talked about the one play where he looked left, turned back right, and found Brendan Bates, one of the deeper down the depth chart tight ends, for a touchdown where he manipulates the defense and finds it for 6. Like he's doing all the things you asked him to do. The biggest reason I don't have him number 1 is because he hasn't done that against the first team yet. We've seen him do it we've seen him do it with the 2s. We've seen him do it with the 3s and 4s a ton. And every step of the way, he has been steadily consistent, which is the most important thing he can do. I've talked about it. What is he doing with the reps that he's been given? He is maximizing them to the nth degree. I've been very impressed with him. Impressed isn't even the right word, because this is what I expected from Shedeur Sanders. He's also said the right things. He's done the right things. He's putting in the work. He doesn't care that he is sort of buried in the depth chart in the Browns' minds right now. He's just trying to improve every day, go out and prove why he has a chance to compete for this job. And I do think he's earned the right when training camp rolls around to take some reps with the 1s and see if he can continue translating it against the best players on this team. We'll see if he gets that opportunity. But based on what I've seen, I feel comfortable saying he should be the number 2 quarterback on this team at the end of mandatory minicamp. So for me, it goes Flacco, then it goes Shedeur Sanders. That's how my list starts. The next 2 for me, I would say Dillon Gabriel should probably be 3. He took a number of reps with the 1s. I don't know that he looked great, but I also think that he, I think he's learning on the fly here, same way Shedeur is. I think there's some room for improvement for sure. And similarly to Shedeur, when he was taking reps with the 2s and the 3s and the 4s, he looked a little more consistent. He looked a little more steady. Granted, there were some incompletions. I think he doesn't see the field as well as Shedeur does. I think that's pretty much been on display, which is why I have him below Shedeur Sanders. Yes, the arm strength is there, but that only gets you so far. I do think his height is a disadvantage for him, which has been talked about already. But I also don't think we got to give him some grace here. He's a rookie. He's coming in and trying to sort of learn an NFL offense and get acclimated and pick up the playbook and translate those things in the field. And, he has a learning curve as well. And so I'm willing to sort of give him some grace to keep developing. And the fact that he was given those first team reps throughout minicamp, I think speaks to how the team feels about him, or at least how the team wants to feel about him. They want to give him those chances to prove himself worthy of that role and see how much he can maybe climb this depth chart himself. So we'll see what that looks like. But I think Dillon would be 3. And then for me, I think Kenny Pickett is 4th. And that might shock some people because he is of the group. Flacco's the elder statesman. He's been in this league for so long. But Pickett's next in line, right? Like he's the next veteran in the group. He was part of a Super Bowl winning team last year. He has the 4th quarter comebacks everybody talks about in Pittsburgh. He's learned some things. And it's not that I think like Kenny Pickett, I think would be a fine backup on this team, which is what originally I believe they traded for him for. I think they traded for him as like, hey, if somebody goes down, we know we have this guy to fall back on. And it's not a bad option to have as a backup quarterback. But do I think he's a starting caliber quarterback in the NFL that you want to start your season with? No. And the reasons I laid out why I think Flacco is that guy, if you're choosing between the vets, where he's going to make people better, I don't know that Kenny Pickett's going to do that. What evidence do we have that Kenny Pickett is going to lift up the guys around him on any team that he's played on? I don't know that I believe that. And so for me, I think he had the worst mini camp of anybody. I know he's going against the 1s versus Gabriel and Shedeur were going against 2s, 3s, and 4s a lot of the time. And even Gabriel struggled against the ones when he was out there. So I get that, but Gabriel being a rookie gets a little more leeway because he has room to maybe learn and develop. Whereas with Pickett, I think like he's been in this league for a long time, and I still see some of the problems that persisted when he was in Pittsburgh, and I guess to a lesser extent Philly. But we didn't get to see him a lot in Philly last year because he was a backup, which is I think the role that's perfect for him. If it was me setting the depth chart, that's what it would be. Now, conversely, I think the Browns really like Kenny Pickett. I think it's basically him and Flacco, or I think Flacco and him are 1A, 1B. And then I think it's Dylan Gabriel, and then I think it's Shedeur Sanders in the eyes of the team. That's the eyes of the team. But for me, if I was running the franchise and I was trying to set a depth chart after minicamp based on what I've seen, it would be Flacco, Shedeur, Gabriel, Pickett. Your thoughts, your quarterback depth chart. Share them with me at Spencito_. Jump in the comments section. Let me know who you think or what you think the Browns quarterback depth chart should look like at the end of mandatory minicamp. And meanwhile, it was the quarterbacks that stole the show, obviously, this past week. But there are several other takeaways I have in the aftermath of minicamp, including one rookie who looks like the next big thing. We'll talk about it coming up next on the Locked On Browns. There's nothing like the NBA playoffs, the intensity, the buzzer beaters, the fans losing their minds. It's the kind of atmosphere you must experience live, and this year's matchups are already delivering. Maybe you want to make an impromptu trip out to Indiana to see the Pacers play against the Thunder in this NBA Finals. Guess what? If you want to do it, if you want in, Game Time makes it fast and easier than ever to get seats, even for the biggest playoff games. Prices on the app actually go down closer to tip-off, and with killer last-minute deals, panoramic seat views, and no surprise fees, Game Time is a total game changer. I used Game Time for the first time last year. Bought tickets for my wife and I to go see Ohio State, Michigan. We were disappointed with the results, but I can tell you the ticket buying experience was so smooth. It's now my go-to app for buying tickets. With the Brown season fast approaching, why don't you get in on the action? Go find tickets to go see your Brownies play this fall, and Game Time is the place to do it. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app. Create an account and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. This episode is also brought to you by our friends at Epicor. Every team knows the value of hard work in taking pride in what you build and in practicing every detail to get the best results. But no one player, no matter how amazing, can do it all alone. Working together makes getting the win easier. At Epicor, the all-stars are the hardworking manufacturers and distributors who create and deliver the things we all need, from aerospace to electrical to medical devices. Epicor ERP solutions are created by industry experts to help make every day easier. Seeing your whole supply chain is easier. Managing logistics is easier. Responding to price changes is easier. For small businesses with big dreams to growing enterprises with a global vision, we'll equip you with the right tools to move forward, think ahead, and lead the way. Because as the clock ticks down, you need to make the most of every hardworking minute. Easier doesn't cut corners. Easier finds the lane. Discover your success at www.easierwithepicor.com. That's www.easierwithepicor.com. All right, so the quarterbacks, of course, were the topic du jour at minicamp this week. They will be the topic du jour, I'm sure, at training camp when that opens up at the end of July. But that doesn't mean that that was the only thing to observe, take in, watch during minicamp this past week. There was an assortment of other things that obviously were important to keep an eye on. And I'll start with the fact that I think this offense, and listen, in a week where Nick Chubb left, signed elsewhere, signs with the Houston Texans, and is no longer part of the Cleveland Browns. It was a disappointing situation the way that played out. People wanted him back. We know Nick Chubb was just so adored in this town. In the week that happens, I think what was cool was you were out there at minicamp and you were watching Quinshon Judkins do what he does, and it feels like even with Nick Chubb gone, the offense, the run game, all of that position is in good hands because, frankly, like Quinshon Judkins looks like the real deal. And listen, let's add the caveat, let's add the context that I think Duce Staley said this. Which, by the way, speaking of Duce Staley, I got a clip for you coming up. Reason for excitement when it comes to this Browns team moving forward into 2025. We'll talk about it coming up. But Duce Staley joked that they're in pajamas right now because all they wear is their helmets, and it's like helmet, jerseys, shorts, whatever. They're not actually in full pads, right? And so keeping that in mind and understanding, like, yeah, they're not tackling guys. They're not bringing anybody to the ground. There's not a ton of contact going on at this juncture or the stage of the training that the team is doing and all that. And, you know, like, you don't get a real sense of what a guy's going to look like until they are in full pads. But understanding those things, you know, you could see, like, it was noticeable that Quinshon Judkins was one of the best players on the field at any given time when the offense was out on the field. There was a couple times where he would make a nice run where he was like running up the middle, had to make a crazy cut and bounce outside, and he'd break away. A couple times where he would like really get he'd shrink himself down, get in between the line, and then burst into the second level for a big gain before he was even contacted. Like, he looks legit. Now, I'm not gonna put him on the Nick Chubb scale and say he's gonna be Nick Chubb, because I think that's unfair. But like, if anybody is still feeling the emotions of Nick Chubb not being here, Quinshon Judkins' presence with this team should soften the blow a little bit, because I think he's going to be the real deal, and I think he's showed that early on in this process where, you know, he's looked fantastic this week, and it feels like the offense is in good hands with him, and we'll talk more about that here coming up. We'll also talk more about, like, the offensive line is getting back to business, man. Like, I think that this week was really revelatory in terms of seeing this group healthy for the first time. Like, think about it. Last year, Jack Conklin was coming back from an injury. He didn't really play till a couple games into the season. Jedrick Wills was banged up at this time last year. DeJuan was still banged up this time of year, even though he was trying to kind of go out there and just play through his injuries. For the first time, that entire starting group is healthy. DeJuan's trying out his hand at left tackle. We'll see how it goes. And that's the one big question mark. But, like, if these guys are healthy and if they're going back to what they do best anyway, man, like, they could be a really, really solid group again. And we're talking about an offensive line that at one point was considered one of the best offensive lines in football. I thought they looked great this week. They were moving well. They were communicating well. Last year during training camp, this offense couldn't get plays off because there were so many miscommunication issues. It was too many moving parts, too many guys in and out, trying different bodies in different places because there were so many guys banged up. I think it was a promising sign and start to the build up to the season that group just looks like they're in sync right now, and they look really agile. They look healthy. DeJuan Jones is a big part of that because he's been, you know, he lost some weight. We talked about that in a previous episode. He looks like he's ready to take on that challenge of being the left tackle, and he's kind of learning on the fly there. But man, like, he's just part of the equation. This group has a chance to get back to business and get back to being a pretty dominant group, I think, again. I was also sort of caught off guard by the fact that I think I've realized through minicamp that the linebacker room is maybe deeper than we think. I know that hasn't always been a priority for Andrew Berry, you know, bolstering the linebacker room, but, you know, they drafted Carson Schlesinger. He's looked like he could give you some of that those JOK skills and traits where he's really rangy, more so traits where he's rangy. He can run side to side. He can diagnose plays really quickly and fly up and make them. I'm excited to see him get full pads on and see what he can do in those settings rather than just in a helmet and jersey and shorts. But I think, like, he showed some promise in this camp, but it goes deeper than that because I'm talking about the group as a whole being deep. Obviously, you got Jordan Hicks. Obviously, you got Mahmoud Diabate, who's back from last year after I thought he played pretty solid last year, filling in for guys that were injured. Devin Bush is back, who filled in very valiantly for JOK last year. And then you also added Jerome Baker, who's a veteran in this league that can offer some versatility and do some different things in terms of coverage and whatnot. Like, I think this group actually might be deeper than we're giving it credit for. And so for once, I feel some confidence going into training camp about the linebacker group specifically. And I'm excited to see what they can kind of do and what they show in camp leading up to the season. Another big thing that was on full display is just the desperate need for this team being wide receiver. They need some other bodies in that room. It's part of the reason they're carrying 13 guys is because they don't have a lot of options right now, and they're just trying to spitball and see if anybody stands out from these undrafted rookies that they signed, and if anybody can sort of make this roster. There's a chance that some guy that you might not even really know his name or recognize his name makes this roster just because at least as things stand right now, because they don't have a lot of bodies at that position that have proven anything. I do think it necessitates or cues this team exploring Andrew Berry more so exploring different trade scenarios leading up to training camp, during training camp, whatever it might be. But that has to still sort of play itself out, obviously. But I do think they will be adding a wide receiver at some point, because I have a hard time believing this is the group that's going to go into the season as the Browns wide receiving core, where it's Jerry Jeudy, Cedric Tillman, who they're really excited about, and I understand why, Deontay Johnson, and then like an island of misfit toys, if you will. Jamari Thrash, I think, showed some promise. Like he seems like he's really worked on his ability to high point the ball and get his hands better where he's not dropping passes. But there's still some room for improvement there. And I don't know that anybody feels confident that, like, if he's your starting slot receiver, this offense is going to be lighting it up. So it's obvious that's still a need for this team. And that was clearly on display during minicamp. And then the last thing is just that you talk about depth at the linebacker position. The defensive line was dominant throughout this week. And, like Miles was constantly in the backfield. I think like Mason was making some plays. You saw Alex Wright getting a lot of reps with the first team in the last couple of days as well, opposite of Miles. Like, there are a number of guys that I think are poised for big seasons up front. Jim Schwartz should be licking his chops. And I have a more overarching topic I want to get into about the D-line specifically. But man, like, that group has some serious talent on it, and they're probably deeper than they've ever been. At least since Kevin Stefanski's been here. There should be there's some good vibes around that group right now, and I thought they showed out a little bit this week. The defense is always ahead of the offense this time of year. That's not a surprise, and that'll probably be the case when training camp opens as well. But certainly a lot to like about that defensive line group, headline, of course, by Myles Garrett being back in the fold. We talked about a number of things here. And I know that people are sort of anticipating this being a down year for the Browns in general, just in terms of expectations, win totals, all that. I have a big reason, though, why fans should be excited about the outlook of this team this year. And it comes from Duce Staley. We'll talk about it coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast. All right, so in the aftermath, or in the vein of talking about Quinshon Judkins and how great he looked this week at minicamp, we got to talk to Duce Staley and all the position coaches. And I actually think this is fitting because I threw out on social media, what do you want to, is there anything you want to hear about this week as I wrap up minicamp week on Friday's episode? And somebody tweeted me and just said straight up, like, position coaches, like, or position by position coaching, like, how is that going, what's going on there? I think there were some interesting things said by a lot of these position coaches. Chad O'Shea talked about the idea that I mentioned it last segment, they have a bunch of receivers on this roster right now, most of them unproven. They're running like 13 guys deep, and how Kevin Stefanski's divvied up, if you will, some receivers on one field, some receivers on another field, and how they've utilize them to maximize the reps for everybody, the quarterbacks and these receivers, and just get them as many reps as possible. And for what it's worth, sometimes it's hard to see like who the ones are, because they're constantly rotating these guys. Like, it might start like Jerry Jeudy, Jamari Thrash, Cedric Tillman, whatever. And then the next time around, it might be like Jerry Jeudy with like Luke Floria. Like, it just changes constantly because they're just rotating in and out across the two fields that they had set up. And I'm sure we'll see more of that, at least in the early stages of training camp, and how that all sort of plays out. But for now, like, that, I thought that was an interesting conversation. Mike Bloomgren, the new offensive line coach, talked about helping recruit Joe Bitonio to stay and keep playing and not retire. I thought that was kind of fun and interesting. And he talked a lot about DeJuan Jones, just, how he thinks he can make that transition and what he's bringing to the table. And we heard Joe Bitonio talk about how the mentality that Mike Bloomgren has brought is what he wants out of a coach. And he used a very explicit way of describing what he is, but he basically said that offensive line coaches need to be jerks. And Mike Bloomgren sort of talked about like, yeah, I gotta be myself first and foremost, but I think the guys can tell, like, I really love football, and that's kind of where this all comes from. So all those things were fascinating. All those things were interesting to me. Made for some good press conferences and insight into the individual groups that these guys are all working with. But Duce Staley is always a lightning rod when he speaks. He always brings some energy. He's fun. He cracks some jokes. He's a great just personality to be able to converse with and get information from and hear from this time of year and throughout training camp and whatnot. And so he spoke on the running back group. And we know there's been so much said. I've said it. Others have said it, like that they're going back to the basics of this offense. They're going back to what made Kevin Stefanski's offense successful when he first got here in 2021. Ground game being a big part of it, that being sort of the bread and butter, the identity of the team, outside zone concepts, all that stuff. And Duce, the way he talks about going back to those things and the guys they have to pull it off, I think it should make, if you're a Browns fan, you don't have a pulse if this doesn't get you excited, because I like, this is the thing that fans should be looking at and saying, like, this is why maybe Browns fans, or why the Browns are going to be better than people are expecting. Here's what Duce had to say.
Yeah, Kevin's done a good job, man. He all off season, we talked about, of course, what you just said, just rebuilding the run game, going back to day one when Kevin got here, going back to when he was in Minnesota running wide zone. That's one of our staples, and that's what we're going to stick to, and we have the backs for that.
I thought, again, him just giving you the answer of we're going back to that, and Kevin's done a great job of allowing us to do that, and we have the backs for that, and that's an important thing for us to do. That is the thing that, again, fans should be holding on to. If you're looking for reason for optimism about this season, if you're looking for reasons to be convinced that the Browns maybe are going to be better than people are giving them credit for, I think it's that. It's going back to what makes Kevin Stefanski's offense so successful. It's the personnel they have to do it. Like, quarterbacks aside, we talk so much about the quarterbacks, and rightfully so, right? I mean, this quarterback room it's a four-way competition. We know this. And certainly there is like, when you have that going on with the team, when you have a group that is at that position, especially that you don't have an answer for, of course everyone's going to be paying attention to the quarterbacks first and foremost. So I'm not saying not to talk about the quarterbacks, but we almost, like, what I think is going to be more important to this offense even than that is if they are going back to what made them successful, so many years ago now, 4 or 5 years ago now, the ground game is going to be their identity. And so having success with that, I think, is going to set all these quarterbacks up for success, whether it's Flacco, whether it's Shedeur, whether it's Pickett, whether it's Gabriel, whoever's back there, they can be made more comfortable. They can be set up for better success based off of the ground game being as effective as people like Duce are talking about it being, and how important that is to this team. So as we turn the page on minicamp, start looking ahead to training camp, I think it's really important to just keep that in perspective. Keep in perspective the idea that if there's one thing, if there's reason for optimism, if you're looking for a reason to be excited about this upcoming season, that is the thing to be excited. I get, like, yeah, Shedeur, if he starts, again, polarizing player, people are going to be excited about that, of course. But the idea that the run game could get back to being a top 5 unit, and that could propel the offense, again, no matter who's under center, and could make them successful, that's the thing you should hang your hat on. That's the thing you should be feeling, good about moving forward, because, man, we saw what these offenses looked like back then when Stefanski first got here, and there was a lot of promising things. You made the playoffs in 2020 with that being sort of the staple of your offense and the identity of your offense. So I know I'm excited about that. Of course, we'll talk quarterbacks, but that ground game and how Quinshon looks right now, even, and plus him and Samson. Duce Staley talked about that too. The idea that those two offer two different sort of skill sets, they're going to use them differently, and what that all kind of looks like. I know I'm chomping at the bit to see how it all kind of comes together at training camp. I think it's going to be an important sort of an important thing to pay attention to, an important concept to pay attention to. And if there's reason to be excited about this season that people are anticipating is going to be very good, It's the fact that they're going back to what made them successful before, and they're doing it with guys that are young and exciting, and with an offensive line that is finally healthy. There's your reason right there. There's something to cling to for, I guess, if you're looking for a reason for hope for this team being better than anticipated. That's it. That's the thing. And I think Duce encapsulated that with the way he talked about it and feeling like they have the personnel to pull it off. And I think big things are coming from that phase of the game for them. And it's going to sort of drive what direction the season goes. If they can run the football, it might not be, the pundits out there predicting 3-4 wins, whatever, might be right. If they can run the football, okay, maybe you give yourself a fighting chance. Maybe you're in that playoff picture late in the year. Who knows? I'm not predicting that, but I think like I've said competent offense is the biggest thing this team needs to win even just 6 games and improve upon last year's marks that were as embarrassing and as abysmal as can be. So, all right, another episode down with you, Dog Pound. Thank you for joining me as always to talk about your favorite football team. Minicast behind us. We got plenty more to come though in the weeks ahead as we count you down to training camp. We'll talk the top 3 reasons to be optimistic, the top 3 reasons to be pessimistic about this team. We'll break down position groups and much, much more. So hit that subscribe button. Make Locked On Browns your first listen every single day. For your second listen, you can also check out Locked On NFL Scouting or keep it local. Check out Locked On Cavs or Locked On Guardians. Thank you for being in every day at the Locked On Podcast Network. I will talk to you again real soon, Cleveland. Have a great weekend. See ya.